Good evening. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you about Bigfoot looking in windows, looking in tents, looking in cars. I think it's fascinating. This seems to be a pretty common Bigfoot behavior a lot of people experience. And I think there's some obvious reasons and maybe some not so obvious reasons of why this is. For me, this is always kind of the most frightening thing because, you feel safe in your house, you feel safe in your car, you feel safe in your tent. It's kind of going back to, I think, when we were a more primitive species and we lived more in huts or in tents or in longhouses or in communal areas. It was kind of your refuge from the rain, the wind, the cold. So it's really disturbing to us when you go out in the woods and you encounter something, that's one thing. But when you go back to your place of refuge, you want to feel safe. And I think the just being a human, anything looking through the window at you, even if it's another human, a prowler, or you happen to see a bear walk by and look through your window, or whatever it is, it's kind of an invasion of privacy. But then when you add on to the fact that monsters aren't supposed to be real, Bigfoot's not supposed to be real, what do they want, what are they looking at, it's really quite frightening. If you've ever seen the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek, if you haven't, go look it up. It's one of the best Bigfoot classic horror mockumentary type movies out there. But there's this one scene where they're all in the house and they've been harassed by this thing, and this big hairy arm goes in through the windows, and all the girls just scream. It's great. It's great. Go check it out. But that always just kind of goes through my mind. And I think when it comes to houses and when it comes to tents and things, I think there's a certain amount of Bigfoot seen lots of structures. They know structures. They know humans make the structures. Everything going way, way back to like log cabin days, and to the Indians, that lived in longhouses or teepees or in adobe or whatever that particular type of Native American lived in. I think they're used to structures, but glass has got to be kind of a little bit confusing to them because I'm sure they've seen ice before, but big clear sheets of this, really hard rock-like structure, but you can see through it, and it's just got to seem like some kind of a magic to them. So I think there's a lot of that. And you got to remember, when you have the lights on inside your house and it's dark out, everybody outside can see in really easy. Just like during the daytime, you can see out. Everything's lit up by the day. But it's harder for them to see in. It's kind of those same concepts. So I think at night when you're moving around, I think these things can become curious. And I think this is, especially if you live more out in the woods or if it's a property, like some of the experiences I've had, that people aren't there all the time. Nobody's living there, excuse me, nobody's living there full time. That, you're out barbecuing, you're playing music, you're unloading cars, people are moving around and tromping around and, turning the water on and firing up wells and things that maybe hasn't been done for maybe even a couple months. And I think this is definitely drawing them in, and I think they definitely want to see what's going on. It could be a territory thing. It could also be if someone kind of lives on their own and lives a quiet life and then new cars show up and different people show up or have a party. I think this is just very inviting to them. I think they're very curious about us, just like we are about them. Kind of like if we go out in the woods and we're near one of their nesting sites or a habituation site, and we go out there and we start snapping pictures and peering into trees, and we find these blinds that we're kind of rummaging through. It's kind of they probably feel a lot of the same way when we do when they come and open our coolers at a campsite or look in our windows or look under our cars and move stuff around on a porch. It's probably as invaded as we feel. I'm sure they feel a lot of the same. So I think there's a lot of mutual curiosity. I will say, though, there is a different component to this. I think there's also kind of a prey or maybe even some kind of a mating type behavior that goes on. I think a lot of times it's younger male Bigfoots do this kind of stuff. I think the big lone males, unless it's a pure territory type dispute, I think they'll stay away. I think it's the young kind of teenagers getting in trouble. I think they want to check out what's going on. I think a lot of times you get reports of them looking in windows at kids. And I think when they see adults, I think they think of an adult as hunters, people who drive these cars. But when they see kids, I think there's not a lot of malice with kids. So I think there's a lot of curiosity towards them. And there's a lot of reports of them looking at women and everything else too. And there's reports of them stealing, Native American maidens and Indian maidens and stuff like that. So maybe there's some modern day truth to that, the whole missing 411 thing. So I think there can be a prey component. I think it can be some kind of a mating companionship type component to it. And I think it's just a lot of curiosity as well. I just want to keep tabs on us, check what's going on. And then you get in other situations where I don't think they necessarily will look inside windows. I think maybe they will from a distance, but as opposed to coming right up to the window where they could be seen, they're probably going to hang back 15 or 20 feet and maybe hide behind a tree and look through a window, get a good angle on you where they're really in the shadows, really away from porch lights. There's always, you got to remember, even in the dark, there's a lot of theories out there that even Bigfoot can see pretty well in the dark and we can't. And there's a lot of things where I think the Bigfoots think we can see in the dark as good as them. Because when people see them on FLIR and in night vision, they're often, even in pitch black, still hiding behind something, still crouched behind grass or behind a tree. There's always something between them. So I think if it's certain situations, they'll try to put, maybe a fence railing or a tree or something between them while looking through the window. And I think a lot of this applies to tents too. I think they know what tents are. They want to, they know people stay in them. They could probably sense when people are in there, although I think they got to get close to hear us breathing or to smell us or to hear us rustling around. But there's lots of reports of them coming into campsites and stealing stuff out of coolers and moving things around and footsteps at night. And I think there's just the same reason. There's a lot of curiosity there. And one of the other things that people get is strange sounds or tapping. They're almost kind of like not in an aggressive way, but like they want you to come outside. And whatever you do, don't go outside. You it might not be good for you. The other thing to also think about is in cars. As humans, we spend a lot of time in cars. And for me, that's how I would like the most ideal Bigfoot sighting is like what you would see here. I'd like to see one very up close, but I'd like to be in my car going about 45 miles an hour with a gun in my lap and get a really good solid look at it. And then that's good enough for me. Or through a spotting scope, like half a mile away or something. But it's not common. The same reason why you see a lot of animals on roadsides is the same reason Bigfoot would. You're going to tromp through the bushes, or you're going to go down this nice paved or gravel road or railroad track or something. So there's roads everywhere. They have to cross them to get from one point to another. They're also an easier path. And this also just leads to different things of like, I think when people have to remember with glass, especially if it's dirty, they can leave handprints. There's lots of reports of them leaving handprints on cars and on windows and, in the dirt of a car. And I think it's, very cool if you get this, take pictures of it, put something for scale, a dollar bill, a quarter, put your own hand up next to it. If you really wanted to get fancy, I know you can dust for fingerprints or maybe even take DNA or look for hair around there. But like I said, glass I think is kind of a strange thing to them. So I think they're used to wood structures and maybe even like, stucco they probably view as some kind of a stone. But when it comes to steel on cars and glass on windows, I think it's just kind of like, not really magic to them, but I think it's just such a foreign substance that they could see through, but it's solid. So I think they will touch it a lot of times. And especially if it's dirty or on the side of a car or something, I think it's really cool. There's a lot of great handprints out there. And for the most part, they look like a giant human hand. The thumb seems to be placed in a little bit different location, but it's just something to look out for, especially if you're in one of these, especially if you're in this, different parts of the country that have been known to have these things. And I think it can almost be kind of like a dog. Sometimes they might smush their head right up against the glass to get a better look of what's inside. I think this is a lot of curiosity too, is I think you're used to seeing humans in cars, and if they're in there, or, if there's a food, maybe they would break in and get it. There's reports of these things trying handles on doors before and opening up coolers. So I don't doubt for a second that with their hands and their dexterity and the things that they could do, that they could definitely open up a car door, or they could definitely get into a house if they really wanted to. So that's going to conclude today's video. Just a few things to think about. If you think you're being lured outside, don't go outside. That's the one tip I'll give you. But tapping, peering through windows, this is all super common behavior. And I think a lot of it's curiosity. Some of it could be a hunting behavior. Some of it could be for other nefarious purposes, like I said. So it's always very fascinating to me. Please stay safe in the woods, folks. Keep your blinds shut if you live out in the woods. And don't give them anything to look at. Thanks.